My beloved child, stop for a moment and listen carefully, because this message has found you at a moment when your heart may not yet understand what is happening behind the scenes. You may think Taunt was just another night. You may think people went about their lives, conversations happened, doors opened and closed, and nothing unusual took place. But I tell you, something happened in a conversation you were not present for, and what was spoken about you carried more meaning than you realize. There are moments when I allow you to see only the surface, while beneath that surface I am moving pieces of your story into place. There are conversations you cannot hear, questions you cannot answer, and thoughts in another person's heart that you could never force into the light. Yet I see them all. Your soulmate was with a girl last night, and during that conversation, something shifted. At first, it may have seemed ordinary. They may have laughed. They may have talked about life, memories, people, disappointments, plans, and things that seemed completely unrelated to you. But then your name, your presence, your memory, or something connected to you entered the conversation. And when it did, the atmosphere changed in a way that neither of them expected. You were not there to hear what was said, but I was there. You were not there to see the expression on your soulmate's face, but I saw it. You were not there when she asked the question, but I heard every word, and I want you to understand something before your mind begins creating fearful stories. Do not assume the worst simply because another woman was near the person you love. Do not allow insecurity to write a story that I have not written. Do not let fear take one unanswered question and turn it into 1,000 painful conclusions. You have been through enough moments where uncertainty made you believe that everything was slipping away. This time, I want you to breathe, because the question she asked about you was not as simple as it sounded. There was something underneath it, something she wanted to understand. Something she had noticed, something your soulmate had revealed without realizing how much he or she was revealing, and that is where the story begins. You may have wondered why this person has sometimes seemed distant, distracted, quiet, emotional, or difficult to understand. You may have asked yourself why someone who once appeared so close could suddenly become difficult to reach. You may have wondered whether their feelings changed. You may have wondered whether another person entered their life. You may have wondered whether you were forgotten. You may have looked at silence and interpreted it as rejection, but silence does not always mean absence. Sometimes silence means someone is fighting a battle inside themselves. Sometimes silence means they are afraid of what they feel. Sometimes silence means they are trying to understand why one person continues to occupy a place in their heart that no one else can replace. And sometimes, my child, silence is where I am doing my deepest work. Your soulmate has been thinking about you more than you know. There have been moments when your name appeared in their mind unexpectedly. There have been moments when an ordinary song reminded them of you. A place, a smell, a conversation, a date, a photograph, a familiar phrase, or even something completely insignificant brought you back into their thoughts. They may not have told you. They may not even understand why it happens. But I know what happens in the secret chambers of the heart. I know what a person remembers when no one is watching. I know what they feel when the room becomes quiet. I know the thoughts that come after midnight when distractions disappear and a person can no longer hide from themselves. And last night, something came to the surface. That girl was talking to your soulmate, and she noticed something. Perhaps it was the way your soulmate reacted when your name was mentioned. Perhaps it was the sudden silence. Perhaps it was the change in expression. Perhaps it was the way they defended you. Perhaps it was the way they became emotional. Perhaps it was the fact that they knew details about you that someone who had supposedly moved on should not still remember. She noticed, and she became curious, so she asked, "What is it about this person?" That may not have been the exact sentence, but the heart behind the question was there. What is so different about you? Why does this person still matter? Why do you still remember them? Why does their name still carry weight? Why do you become quiet when they are mentioned? Why do you defend them? Why haven't you completely moved on? And your soulmate had to confront something they may have been avoiding, something they may have tried to bury, something they may have convinced themselves was no longer important, but I allowed the question to reach a place they had been avoiding. You see, my child, sometimes I use another person's question to reveal a truth that someone has been afraid to admit to themselves. The girl may have thought she was simply asking out of curiosity, but I knew what the question would awaken. Your soulmate may have laughed at first. They may have tried to change the subject. They may have said something casual. They may have pretended it was nothing. But the heart cannot always cooperate with the mouth. There are truths the lips can deny while the eyes reveal them. There are feelings a person can hide from others but cannot hide from me. And when she asked about you, something inside your soulmate became unsettled, not because you are a problem, not because you are a burden, but because your existence in their heart has not disappeared the way they wanted to believe it had. My beloved child, you have been asking me for signs. You have been asking me whether something is happening. You have been asking me whether this connection still matters. You have been asking me whether the distance means the end. You have been asking me whether you should keep believing or finally release everything. And I am telling you today, do not make a permanent decision based on a temporary silence. You do not know everything I am doing. You see one chapter. I see the entire book. You see the closed door. I see what is being prepared behind it. You see the delay. I see the reason. You see the separation. I see the transformation happening inside both hearts. There are things I have been working on that you cannot see yet, and this conversation was one of them. Your soulmate was not simply talking to another. That girl's question became a mirror, and suddenly, your soulmate had to look at something they had been avoiding. They had to remember. They had to compare. They had to think. They had to ask themselves why your memory still affects them. Why do they still wonder what you are doing? Why do they still care whether you are okay? Why do they still want to know whether you have moved on? Why do they still imagine what it would be like if things had gone differently? Why does the thought of someone else taking your place feel uncomfortable? These are not questions I reveal accidentally. There are moments when I allow the heart to become uncomfortable because comfort can sometimes keep a person asleep. Your soulmate needed to wake up, not because I want to force anyone, not because I manipulate hearts, but because sometimes a person becomes so accustomed to avoiding the truth that they need a moment that makes avoidance impossible. Last night may have been such a moment, and you may never know the exact details. You may never know every word spoken. You may never know how long the conversation lasted. You may never know what expression crossed your soulmate's face, but you do not need to know every detail for me to be working. I do not require your complete understanding before I begin moving. I require your trust, my child. There is something I want you to release right now. Release the need to compete. You do not need to compete with another woman. You do not need to prove that you are better. You do not need to become someone you are not. You do not need to chase. You do not need to beg. You do not need to manipulate. You do not need to make someone jealous. You do not need to create circumstances to force attention. If someone is meant to recognize your value, they must recognize it freely. Love that must constantly be chased becomes exhaustion. Love that is rooted in truth can survive silence. And I am teaching you the difference. You have spent too much time wondering whether you are enough. You have questioned your appearance. You have questioned your personality. You have questioned your worth. You have compared yourself with people who were never supposed to be your competition. You looked at another person and thought, maybe they have something I don't. But listen to me. No one else carries your exact story. No one else has your memories. No one else has your particular way of loving. No one else has walked through the exact nights you survived. No one else has cried the tears you cried. No one else knows what it cost you to become the person you are becoming. Your value was never determined by whether someone chose you quickly. Your value was never determined by whether someone replied to your message. Your value was never determined by whether someone stayed. Your value came from me before anyone ever knew your name, and now I am restoring that understanding inside you. You have been waiting for another person's decision to determine your peace, but I am calling you back to me, because when your peace depends on another person, every silence becomes a storm, every delayed message becomes rejection, every social interaction becomes a threat. Every woman or man near them becomes a reason to panic. I do not want you living like that. I want you to love without losing yourself. I want you to hope without becoming desperate. I want you to believe without becoming obsessed. I want you to trust without demanding that tomorrow reveal itself today. Because there is something beautiful about divine timing. When I bring something into your life, you will not have to destroy yourself to keep it. You will not have to beg for basic respect. You will not have to abandon your dignity. You will not have to become smaller so someone else feels comfortable. You will not have to chase a person who refuses to walk toward you. But there is also something you must understand. Sometimes I allow distance before restoration. Sometimes I allow silence before clarity. Sometimes I allow confusion before revelation. Sometimes I allow a person to lose access to you so they can finally understand what your presence meant. Your soulmate may be experiencing that realization now. They may not say it immediately. They may not suddenly appear at your door. They may not send the message you have been waiting for tonight. But something has shifted, and shifts often happen quietly before they become visible. A seed changes beneath the soil before anyone sees a green leaf. The sunrise begins before the sky becomes bright. A heart can change before a mouth announces the change. That is why I tell you not to panic during the invisible season. The invisible season is not the meaningless season. Some of my greatest work happens where human eyes cannot see. Think about how many things in your own life changed before you knew they were changing. Think about the doors that eventually opened after you thought everything was closed. Think about the people you once believed you could never live without, and how I taught you to survive without them. Think about the strength you discovered only because you were forced to stand alone. You thought you were being abandoned. I was teaching you independence. You thought I was withholding. I was protecting you. You thought the delay meant no. I was preparing something you could not yet carry. And now you are becoming someone who can receive without destroying what you receive. That matters, because sometimes we ask for a blessing while remaining emotionally unprepared for it. We ask for love while carrying fear. We ask for restoration while holding resentment. We ask for commitment while secretly believing we will eventually be abandoned. We ask for a new beginning while still living emotionally inside the old ending. But I am healing those contradictions in you. And I am working in your soulmate too. Perhaps your soulmate has been wrestling with regret. Perhaps they remember something they said. Perhaps they remember something they failed to say. Perhaps they remember the moment they walked away. Perhaps they remember the opportunity they ignored. Perhaps they wonder whether you still care. Perhaps they wonder whether they waited too long. Perhaps they are afraid that if they come back, you will reject them, and perhaps that fear is one reason they have remained silent. But last night's conversation brought some of these thoughts closer to the surface. That girl may have asked something simple like, "Do you still talk to them?" And your soulmate may have hesitated. That hesitation said more than a long explanation could. Perhaps she asked, "Are you still in love with them?" And maybe your soulmate did not answer immediately. Maybe they looked away. Maybe they changed the subject. Maybe they smiled awkwardly. Maybe they said, "It's complicated, but..." Sometimes, "It's complicated" is the sentence people use when "I still care" feels too vulnerable to say. Maybe she asked, "Would you ever go back?" And suddenly the past stood in front of them. Maybe they said, "I don't know," but their heart knew more than their mouth admitted. My child, I am not telling you this so you become obsessed with another person's every movement. I am telling you this so you understand that what looks finished may not be emotionally finished. But there is an important difference. You must not build your entire life around waiting. Do not put your life on pause. Do not stop growing. Do not stop smiling. Do not stop building your future. Do not stop becoming the person I created you to become. If restoration comes, let it find you living. Let it find you healed. Let it find you stronger. Let it find you peaceful. Let it find you no longer begging for what should be freely given. The greatest miracle may not simply be that your soulmate returns. The greatest miracle may be that you become so whole that you no longer fear whether they return. That is freedom, and freedom changes everything. Because when you are no longer terrified of losing someone, you can finally love from a place of truth rather than fear. You can say, "I want you," without saying, "I cannot live without you." You can say, "I hope we find our way back," without saying, "I will accept anything." just to keep you. You can love deeply and still have boundaries. You can forgive and still have wisdom. You can hope and still have discernment. That is the kind of heart I am creating in you. And perhaps your soulmate is being prepared for that kind of relationship too, because if the two of you ever come together again, it cannot be built on the same patterns that caused pain before. Something must change. Communication must change, honesty must change, consistency must change, fear must lose its control, pride must lose its throne, old wounds must stop directing new decisions. And both hearts must become willing to speak what they once hid. That is why I am allowing time. Time is not always punishment. Sometimes time is preparation. Sometimes distance gives people perspective. Sometimes silence exposes what noise concealed. Sometimes being apart allows someone to understand what being together made them take for granted. And last night, your soulmate may have realized that your absence has not erased you. It has made your presence more obvious. There is a strange thing about human hearts. Sometimes people recognize the value of something most clearly when they can no longer touch it. They begin to notice the empty space. They remember the conversations. They remember the laughter. They remember the way you cared. They remember the little things. They remember how you made them feel, and suddenly, someone else can ask a simple question and unlock an entire room of memories. That may be what happened. And now, my child, I want you to pay attention to what happens next, not with anxiety.